Mirna Nel. I'm an associate professor in the School of Education at the Vaal Triangle campus of the Northwest University of South Africa. I'm also a member of the Potential Research Focus Area on the campus. This focus area focuses on the optimization of potential in people. Within the Potential Research Focus Area, my colleague, Professor Mary Grosser, and myself have a sub-program called Holistic Learner Development within diverse contexts. Our research is based on the belief that all learners can learn, despite experiencing barriers to learning. In this presentation, I will focus on the role of the teacher within inclusive education. However, before I start with this, it is important for me to convey my beliefs on inclusive education. We live in a world of diversity, conflict, judgment, and disrespect. As a result, exclusionary practices occur daily, and in such a world, the child is the most vulnerable. I believe that inclusion is where everyone in any community is respected, accommodated, and valued. This means accepting each person for what he or she is, despite us all looking different, having different needs, and different ways of living, believing, and thinking. Inclusive education should therefore view every child as a child and a human being first, with his or her own specific needs, where he or she is not stereotyped and or labeled because of poverty, illness, disability, or any other barrier to learning. I feel very strongly that we should be careful to associate inclusive education with disabilities only. In the implementation of inclusive education, learners who experience intrinsic barriers to learning, disabilities, as well as barriers to learning because of extrinsic factors such as systemic, socioeconomic, and curriculum barriers, or learning in a second language, need to be a critical and central focus. Based on our complicated political history of racial discrimination and exclusion of learners with special needs, as well as the global movement towards inclusive education, South Africa introduced Education White Paper 6, Special Needs and Education, Building an Inclusive Education and Training System in 2001. A fundamental premise of this white paper is that all learners can learn and need support. Several well-developed policies also ensued White Paper 6. Central to these policies is the teacher. Generally, South African teachers assert that based on human rights, inclusive education is the appropriate educational approach. It is also acknowledged that learners have a diverse needs for a variety of reasons, and it is the teacher's responsibility to accommodate those needs in an inclusive classroom environment. However, a plethora of research studies have shown that there are many challenges that make it difficult for teachers to successfully implement inclusive education. These include large classroom numbers, not enough and appropriate resources and learning material, restricted financial resources, limited and inadequate support from education departments, constant curriculum changes and inflexible curriculum, discipline problems, learners coming from problematic home backgrounds, poor parent support, learning needs that are too diverse in one classroom, and inadequate teacher training. There are three key issues that I want to highlight in this presentation. These are inadequate teacher training, an inflexible curriculum, and learning in a second language. One of the critical issues that is reported by mainstream teachers is inadequate training in identifying, assessing, and providing specific support to learners who experience barriers to learning. Being able to adapt the curriculum and assessment strategies for these learners, as well as teaching in such a way that all learning needs are met. In addition to the aforementioned is the demand of the education department to complete the prescribed curriculum within certain time limits, also called curriculum coverage. Consequently, many learners struggle to keep up. Teachers mention that due to factors such as large classroom numbers and a diversity of learning needs, they are not able to support learners who find it difficult to persevere academically within the demands of the curriculum. A third aspect is the many learners learning and teachers teaching in a second or even third or fourth language. Many research studies have found that the language proficiency of learners and teachers in the language of learning and teaching is insufficient. This complicates successful learning since language infuses all learning. This results in a medical model approach still being applied. If a teacher believes he or she cannot teach and support a learner who experiences a barrier to learning, the learner is referred to a person who they believe has more expertise. This includes departmental support services or health specialists, such as psychologists, speech and occupational therapists. After formal testing has been applied, the learner is usually categorized as an ELSA learner and placed in a special education setting. It is acknowledged that these experts and the test used play an integral part in the support process of learners who experience barriers to learning. However, in a socio-ecological model, which underpins White Paper 6, systemic factors as well as other role players, including teachers, parents and the learners themselves, play just as an important part in assessing and supporting learners who experience barriers to learning. It must be mentioned that the Department of Basic Education is attempting to address this. They have developed a screening, identification, assessment and support policy which outlines the collaborative support process that should be implemented within a socio-ecological model. In order to address the aforementioned challenges at the higher education institution that I work at, we focus on capacitating pre-service teachers to be able to be flexible in their planning and teaching, critically analyze situations and then think on their feet when challenged with diversity, understand learners' contexts, apply various teaching and assessment strategies, and take the learning pace and needs of learners into consideration. We also provide a limited exposure to identifying and supporting barriers to learning. The following questions can be asked. How can an inclusive pedagogy be applied by teachers to address a diversity of needs? And how can inclusive education be embedded in an initial teacher education program?